your patience. We just wanted to wait until the secretary was done. You are patient people. The Greeks especially, of course. I have just two items for all of you at the top. As you know, we're continuing our Free the Press campaign. Today we have two Free the Press cases, one from Azerbaijan and one from Syria. The first case is of Avaz Zainali, the editor of the Azerbaijani independent paper, Kural. He was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment on March 12, 2013 on bribery-related charges. Zainali's reporting exposed corruption within the government and human rights and media freedom. NGOs consider him a political prisoner. We call on the government of Azerbaijan to respect a free and pluralistic media and release Zainali. The second group of journalists, I should say, that we want to highlight are prominent Syrian blogger Hussein Khrir and journalist Hani Al-Zitani. They were arrested in February 2012 when regime authorities raided the offices of the Syrian Center for Media and Freedom of Expression in Damascus. The SCM is dedicated to promoting freedom of opinion in the Middle East, and in Syria has documented the regime's restrictions on freedom of expression and its suppression of journalists. After several postponed trials, on March 24, 2014, a Syrian counterterrorism court accused them both of promoting terrorist acts and recommended sentencing them to 15 years of imprisonment, including hard labor. Their next hearing date is set for June 18th of this year. While in detention, the men have been denied medical treatment, family visits. They've been subjected to torture, including whippings, severe beatings, electric shocks, and threats of rape and bodily mutilation. We call upon the government of Syria to allow access to detention facilities by international monitors and to implement UN Security Council Resolution 2139, which demands an immediate end to arbitrary detention and torture of civilians, including journalists. With that, Matt.
Right. So let's start with the Middle East, given that today is the first birthday of the peace deal that the Israelis and the Palestinians agreed to after the talks. But after we get to the before getting to that, the second, frankly, I'm not thrilled about this having to ask these questions, but I'm going to because I do have to. The statement that the Secretary released last night on the apartheid comment it seems to have not closed the lid on Pandora's box, but opened it up further. It raises a bunch of questions, and I'll make them brief. But to just start with a small little quibble, the very opening statement, the line says, "For more than 30 years in the United States Senate, I didn't speak words. Support, I walked the walk." Well, Secretary was in the Senate for 28 years, so 1985 to 2013. So that's
I think it's accurate
nearly
to say
30 years.
More than 30 years in public service is accurate to say.
Maybe that. Okay, but granted, 28 years in the Senate is a long time, and certainly he has as he has said over and over, a 100% voting record in support of Israel. He says in this statement that if he could rewind the tape, go back in time to Friday at the Trilateral Commission, that he would have used a different word than apartheid to describe what Israel might possibly turn into if a peace deal isn't reached and there's no two-state solution. Can I ask you, being his spokeswoman, what word would he have used?
Well, Matt, it may not be that there's one specific word, but the important point here is that he was trying to describe, and if you look at the full context of his comments, he was describing his firm belief that the only way in the long term to have a Jewish state and two nations and two peoples living side by side in peace and security is through a two-state solution. Now he knows, and this is the reason we issued the statement on his behalf last night, that he's been around long enough to know the power of words can create a misimpression, even when that's unintentional. And certainly, as he stated in the statement, he didn't want to leave others who to mischaracterize his record or mischaracterize his viewpoints.
Okay, but he says that he wouldn't have used that word. I would have chosen a different word. Are you saying that there is no single word that he would have used? It would be a combination of several
Perhaps words may be a more accurate way of describing it.
But the statement also, it does not appear to be an apology at all. In fact, it seems to be a restatement of his concern that, absent a peace deal, what may emerge is a system, a state, in Israel, a system with two classes of citizens. Is that correct? He still believes that that is a possibility?
Well, certainly what he was referring to, and you're right, what he was, his statement referred to the use of a specific word that is a loaded word with a great deal of history.
Right.
And
But
obviously
he's
people,
expressed
let me
this-
finish my point. Obviously people can mischaracterize that and use it to distort his views and his positions.
Right, but, I mean, if he believes, in fact, whether he uses the word or should have used the word apartheid or not, if he believes that that is the case, that a definition, obviously not the strict South African interpretation of the word, but another interpretation, another definition of the word, which is a segregation, just basically keeping people apart. If he still believes that, why did he put the statement out? If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? If he thinks
Well,
that,
he
if
does-
that's his view, that Israel faces the potential future as a state that has two classes of citizens and is not a full-on democracy. If that's what he believes, why doesn't he? Why is he taking back his word?
He doesn't disagree with the notion that many Israeli leaders have also stated. Justice Minister Livni, Prime Minister Netanyahu, many prime ministers in the past from many different political ilks have stated their concerns about a unitary state and a range of impacts that could have. He agrees with that, but he's not naive about the games played in Washington. What we saw yesterday was many people use his comments and them out of context to distort his record and distort his viewpoints.
But it sounds like he's only, and not apologizing, but, saying that he regrets that the word was being used because he was caught, or whatever word you want to use, or someone recorded him, unbeknownst to him, using it. And isn't it true that, first of all, isn't it true that he has expressed this sentiment, if not the word apartheid, to Israeli leaders in
Which he
in his
repeated in
negotiations?
his statement, that what he was trying to describe was his belief that it's not possible to achieve two states living side by side in peace and security without a two-state solution. And yes, that is a sentiment he has described privately, he has described publicly. But
And-
again, can I make one more point
Yeah.
here? Again, what he, yesterday as we were making the decision about putting this statement out, there were several interpretations of his comments that were inconsistent with his record of more than 30 years in public service. The work he's done to work with the negotiators to bring about a peace process. It didn't reflect his views, it didn't reflect his record. And that's why we put a statement out.
But it does, I think Prime Minister Ehud Barak even said this
You're right.
as recently as this week.
It may be, but I didn't list everybody. But you're right. Many leaders from
And
both
Defense
sides.
Minister, former Prime Minister. But it just kind of goes to Matt's point that if he believes that this to be true, then instead of kind of saying, I regret the statement,
He didn't say that.
Well,
He
not
said
that he
he-
regrets. He
he-
regrets the choice of the word of use
Of the specific word, yes, that's
But-
an important point.
But why does he regret the choice of the word? Because it's being interpreted by others, or because he doesn't feel that way? Because it seems as if he clearly feels that way. He's describing a situation which, loosely is interpreted as an apartheid situation, and he's also pointing to others, and so it's that are saying it, and so it kind of seems as if he's trying to, distance himself from the criticism and not standing by exactly how he believes it to
No,
be the case.
I absolutely disagree with that. In his statement last night, he very clearly conveyed what the point he was making. He referred to other officials who have made a similar point.
Exactly.
At the same time, we all know, you all work in words every single day, that certain words are interpreted in a certain way, have history behind them. So yes, he would have used a different word. The sentiment about the importance of reaching a two-state solution and the challenges of a unitary state, yes, he does completely agree
So
with.
even though he put the statement out saying that perhaps he should have used another word, he still does think that Israel risks becoming an apartheid state in the future if there is no peace agreement.
I
and no
think it's
two-state
very
solution.
important, as we all know, that that the use of the word, the way that people interpret the word, the power of words is a
All right,
major
well, let's
factor
But
here.
he's just
Let's-
being upset
let's
about the way it was interpreted, not the way that he intended it to be perceived.
Well, people perception is important here, Elise. The fact that people were perceiving his comments as being indicative of his opposition to or lack of support for Israel is not only absurd and inaccurate. That's completely something he couldn't let stand.
All right.
We couldn't let stand.
Let's do a little. Let's look at it this way. Let's substitute the word apartheid for the letter X. Even though Secretary Kerry thinks that he perhaps used the wrong word in using the word X in describing what might possibly happen in the
But the
future
word
in
is
Israel,
the vital issue
he
here.
still believes X is a possible future.
The
for
definition
Israel.
of X.
He still believes that, as many Israeli officials have stated, there would be challenges to a unitary state.
right, well then
He
can-
still believes a two-state solution is
Okay.
the right ending and the right approach here. Absolutely.
So in fact, he's not taking back his use what he meant.
He
at
is.
all.
He clearly stated in his statement that he would have used a different word or a different phrase.
Right.
He
Well, can-
still believes that.
Okay, what is that different word or different phrase?
Well, I think, as is evidenced in his statement, Matt, he says he would have used a different way to describe
He would have
his
said-
belief that a two-state solution is the only way for two peoples to live side by side.
All right, so it's just the invocation. He said, invoke the specter of apartheid. That's the specter of apartheid doesn't hang over Israel's potential future if there is no peace deal and no.
He would not describe it that way if he
All
were
right.
to
The other thing he
rewind the
says,
tape
it's
again.
a word best left out of the debate here at home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does that mean that next time he goes to Israel, he will feel free to use the word apartheid?
It does not.
Or
I
in
think
any
he's
other country?
acknowledging in his statement the fact that many in Washington interpret the words, given the history, justifiably with an added meaning.
So
that
he-
was not his intention.
So it is the one might say, toxic political environment in Washington that prevents him from speaking what he feels to be true? Is
I
that-
think we all know that words not only have meaning, but they can be taken and interpreted in many ways. And it's in our interest to convey exactly what
But-
his view is and what it's not.
Yeah, okay, it's in your interest to clarify what you meant when you used the term, but if you come out to the briefing and you say certain words and we interpret it a certain way, you don't come back the next day and say, oh, well, I regret using those choice of words, let me say it a different way.
I think the Secretary of State and words he uses and the meaning of them is something
But
different
Jack, can
from
I
that.
actually clarify? Does he regret using that word? I mean, he says he doesn't say that in the statement.
He said
says,
he
if
would have
I-
used a different word,
if I
Joe.
could rewind the tape.
He would have used a different word or a
Because
different
there's
phrase.
a lot of, on the TVs today, everybody's saying, interpreting this as an apology. Isn't it an apology?
He said he would have used a different word or a different term.
So
I
it's
think
not an
I'm
apology?
gonna leave it as he described
So
it.
it's
Can I-
not an apology. So he doesn't regret using the word
By saying
apartheid.
he would have used a different word, I think he's saying he would have done it differently. So I'll leave
So
you
is that
to.
the expression of his regret?
I think I'll leave it in his words, Joe. Go ahead.
Yeah, but it's not just the debate in Washington. You had Saeed Barakat, who up until today, the 29th, just said that Prime Minister Netanyahu was not serious about the talks over the 9 months, and he said that Netanyahu was consolidating the apartheid regime. What that is, effectively, it's Saeed Barakat using the word after it's been given license because Secretary
I
Kerry
think
used
that's a
it.
bit of a jump to a conclusion there. I would note, as was in his statement, that Prime Minister Netanyahu, Justice Minister Livni, a range of officials from many political backgrounds have used the word in the past to underscore the dangers of a unitary state for the future.
Okay.
It's been around quite a long time. Doesn't mean he would
The
use
use
it
of
again.
This word has
Correct.
been around for quite a long time. Okay. Does he have a problem with Barakat using the word? Does he have a problem with others using the word?
I think he addressed this in his statement when he said that many Israeli officials have used this in the past, but obviously there's not a place for it here.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I just. You're saying he didn't want to leave others to mischaracterize his record, and I just. Isn't it more important? More important than his record is mischaracterizing apartheid? I mean, why don't. No one's talking about the definition of apartheid here. Everyone's talking about fiction, and nobody's talking about the definition of this word, when, as you say, that is what matters here.
I'm not sure. Keep going. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what your question is.
My question is, like, why? You're saying it's historically loaded. You're saying that it can be interpreted in ways that the secretary didn't want. Why is that the case? What is wrong with the definition of the word, and why doesn't it apply? That's the question, right?
All I can speak to is how the secretary would refer to how he sees events in the region. So I'm not sure I can give an analysis of whether anyone in the world can use the word or not.
Okay, well, why did he use that choice of word to describe the? How does he feel that word accurately reflects the dangers? We understand that he didn't say that it is that way. The dangers or the risks of what Israel faces if they don't.
Again, he said that he would have, if he were to rewind the tape, he'd use a different word. And I think he described in great context in his statement last night.
But is it really the word? I mean, like, he's getting upset because his remarks were,
he's not getting upset. I think.
No, but what I'm saying is, like, he's put out this statement because his remarks are the word that he was used that people find issue with. But it doesn't sound like he has any different interpretation of the situation that Israel faces if there's no peace deal. A unity state with, if you take out the word apartheid, and you still have a unity state with second-class citizens and a threat to a Jewish.
As he said many times before, Elise, and as he said in his statement last night. That's why he believes that the only way in the long term to have two people living side by side in peace and security is a two-state solution.
So
can I just rewind a little bit
Sure.
to the beginning? What was the primary purpose of the Secretary putting out his quite strongly worded statement last night? Was it to clarify the comments that he'd made at this trilateral commission, or was it to, in some way, try to mollify and express some regret, even though he didn't use the word, for the comments? What was the primary purpose?
It was, obviously, he's been around long enough to know that the power of words, and know that they can create a misimpression even if it's unintentional. And so, obviously, he's not going to stand there, and we know the games of Washington, as does he. He's been here more than 30 years in public service. So allow others to distort or portray his words in a certain way that they were not intended.
The primary purpose was to clarify his position on the current status of Israel.
It was two purposes, to make clear what he meant and what he didn't mean, what he believes and what he doesn't believe. And obviously, he does not want anyone to have the impression that he was intending to use a word that had as great of a history and as clearly has such an impact on people, and in a way that didn't reflect his meaning.
But the problem is that he still believes that it is a risk for Israel, that Israel risks turning into an apartheid state if there is no peace deal and no two-state solution.
He would not
correct?
Describe it in that
Okay,
way, Matt,
fine, but
if we're given another opportunity to do it.
Okay, well then I guess we'll have. Does he intend? Is this case over? Chapter closed? I mean, does he intend to address this again?
I don't think so. No.
No. So he does not intend to apologize.
He made very clear that he would have used different words.
Right.
I think
But he does
everybody,
not-
as is evidenced today by people's responses, I think people understand that he was conveying he would have done it differently.
So he doesn't intend to apologize.
I don't expect any more commentary on
And
it.
you certain-
behind but take out the word. The sentiment that he expressed without using the apartheid word still stands.
I don't think that is what is causing so much confusion or tension. I think the use of the specific word is what has led to people to distort
The
And
problem
not what
is
it
that-
represents. And not what it represents.
word and what it represents.
But the
both.
distortion here is, I think, that the people who are running around saying that he said it is an apartheid state now, Is that not correct? Isn't that the
didn't say
distortion you're
that.
talking
He did
about?
not
No,
say-
I know
no.
he didn't say that, but that's the distortion that you're.
There are some. It is expanded. It is beyond that, Matt. I think there's a range of comments.
So-
out there,
Okay, so this is the end of it. He doesn't intend to apologize. He still feels the same way. He would just wishes he would had rather used a different
I
word.
think his comments last night made very clear that he would have done it a different way.
Does the
There are many
secret-
ways to say.
One member of the Senate, a man who I believe was in high school when
Mm-hmm.
the secretary was elected to the Senate, and has served for a grand total of 1 year on the Hill, called for the secretary to resign. He said he's not fit to be the nation's top diplomat. One, what does the secretary make of the foreign policy wisdom of Senator Ted Cruz of Texas? And two, does he intend to resign?
Well, obviously, the secretary continues to work quite hard. I'm not going to dignify his comments with a response, to be honest. But let me say, one of the reasons, as was noted in his statement, that we put that out last night is because he's not going to let any official from either political party distort his record, which is more than 30 years in the Senate, walking the walk, as he said in his statement last night.
But
And
not nearly 30 years in the Senate.
more than 30 years in public service. How's that?
But
All right.
I mean, if he's been working this issue for his 29 years in the Senate, and he's
28.
clearly put up
29.
29.
plus.
It wasn't
28.
20.
More than
28.
30 years in public
He's the
service.
one that he's the one that's been using the. He has not said 28 and change. He's said 29. So I'm going to go with 29. If he's been working this for all his years in the Senate, and clearly he's put a lot of effort into the peace process and prides himself on someone who can talk to the Israelis and Palestinians, and he said himself, candidly, telling it like it is, calling them out, then I don't understand why he is bucking under pressure from the Republicans or the, pro-Israel lobby groups or whoever it is, if he feels a certain way.
That's absolutely not what's happening here. He understands words can create a misimpression. And that's why he wanted to convey clearly what he stands for and what he doesn't. And he's not going to allow other people to do that on his behalf.
Well, but by doing what he did, he's not clear about what he stands for and what he doesn't.
I would point you to the full statement where he says, this is what I was saying, this is what I was talking about. Go ahead.
Jen, a year ago, in July, when Secretary Kerry announced the resumption of the talks after a 3-year hiatus with the Israeli and Palestinians in this building, he set a deadline of today for a full peace treaty, which we know has obviously not been achieved. And I wonder if he really felt 9 months ago that we'd be sitting in this room discussing the use of words and not having a peace treaty. And I really wondered whether he feels that it's a lost opportunity and that this is that the talks have failed around his head.
No. It is true, as you said, that the original negotiating period was set to run until April 29, today. There's nothing special about that date now, given that Israel suspended the negotiations last week after the Fatah-Hamas reconciliation plan was announced. Again, a statement, nothing more. We've reached a point, he continues to feel this way, where a pause is necessary. And we're in a holding period where parties will figure out what they want to do next. We continue to strongly encourage both sides not to take escalatory steps. It remains it remains up to the parties to determine whether there is a process forward. But he continues to believe, as does the President of the United States, that a peace agreement and a peace process is in the benefit of both the Israeli and the Palestinian people and the American people. We'll continue to stay in touch with both sides and see what decisions they
Do you
make.
see? Sorry.
So I was going to say, is he willing to launch back into this with the same amount of effort and hard work and persistence that he's put in over the last 9 months?
Oh, if the parties make decisions that are necessary, certainly.
Do you think they will make those decisions?
I can't make that prediction. We'll see. We'll see what they do. They have, we have seen some steps. The Israelis released most of the Palestinian revenues, but again, obviously, more needs to be done.
Do you anticipate Martin Indyk and his team to continue to go out there and meet with the parties separately, or when he says that it's time for a pause, do you mean just kind of pause wholesale pause?
Oh, it's. I don't have any predictions of their travel or return to the region. I think at this point, and obviously we evaluate day by day. Ambassador Shapiro and C.G. Ratney are in touch with both parties, and they're continuing to do the work on the
Is
ground.
there any considerations of the fact, and I know that the Secretary from day one kind of came in and said, I want to dive in and do this, that perhaps it was a little bit too precipitous and not taking into consideration the situation on the ground with both parties, whether it's the Israelis' leadership or the Israeli political climate or the lack of Palestinian reconciliation or political climate within the Palestinians, that maybe the time just wasn't right?
I would say his view. I mean, remember he's known these leaders for decades. He's known the politics in the region for decades, and he engaged in this effort because he believes that now is the time to pursue this process. We'll of course see if the sides are willing to make choices, but he feels that, continues to feel that this period now is when they need to move things forward.
What do you think you would have done differently? How do you think you could have avoided this period, this stillbirth?
I'm not going to look into a rearview mirror. Obviously, as you look at the process moving forward, what we know is that, as Elise said, these are difficult choices to make. There's a lot of history here. Those are all things we knew. So again, as he said, you can lead a horse or horses to water. You can't make them drink. We knew that would be the case from the beginning. I don't have any analysis to lay out for you here today on what we would do differently.
Just a follow-up to that, the UN envoy for the Middle East, in his speech today, said that there was a pause and getting back to talks should build on the U.S. efforts of the past 9 months, but the two parties should not rush back to talks with some sort of unspecified or unrealistic timeline, is how he put it, and without a clear political horizon, which sound a little bit like implicit criticisms of Washington's approach. Is this period, this pause, at least going to be used to look at the way that Washington has been dealing with the peace talks, maybe change strategies or change approaches? Is there any critique going on after this collapse?
Well, we don't view the comments that way. I think those comments reflect our view as well, that the parties need to make their own tough choices and determine themselves whether they are willing to take the steps necessary to have an environment conducive to peace. We agree with that notion.
Just one other question with regards to that. He said that the Secretary General, given President Abbas's assurances that the new unity government would have the same terms of reference as his government on all these issues you've been talking about, given that the unity government, he saw it as an opportunity and not a threat, and that it was not a contradiction to peaceful negotiations. Is that something you disagree with?
I wouldn't put it that way. We've said that there have been principles that have long been principles we've stated from the United States. President Abbas stated those over the weekend and has many times in the past. But again, they've announced plans for reconciliation several times, even in recent years. Those haven't followed through. And obviously, the creation of the government and the details of it are vitally important here.
But, sorry, does that statement by the Secretary General reflect your position more than Israel's approach?
Our position is what I've stated. I'm not going to do analysis of the Secretary General's statement. Go ahead.
Over the 9 months, what, if anything, was accomplished? Because certainly trust was not built. They already knew the issues that they would have to, make sacrifices on. So what concretely was accomplished? Also, what's the point in drawing deadlines and setting a date if it's ultimately not marked by anything at the end?
On the first question, over the past 9 months, the parties did make progress on a range of issues. They talked about all the core issues. They remained at the table, but we're not going to outline that here because we don't see this as case closed. And we continue to believe that laying specifics out from closed-door negotiations isn't in the benefit of anyone. In terms of timelines, look, from the beginning, the timeline was laid out to keep the parties at the table for that amount of time. yes, we're here today, and clearly steps were taken last week that mean today no longer has the meaning it did several months ago. That remains the case. But in any process, timelines and deadlines either keep people at the table, they push action forward, and those can still be very effective.
There's just one more. There was a meeting of the Judea and Samaria Higher Planning Council, which chooses whether or not to advance settlement plans, that the Prime Minister actually canceled for Wednesday. And the reason Israeli officials gave us, the Jerusalem Post, was we're, quote, making great efforts to convince the world that Abbas is a peace rejectionist who embraces Hamas, and a construction announcement at this time would not be beneficial. That's not exactly a quote, but is this the right reason to delay construction? Do you praise the cancellation of settlement announcement plans and whatnot?
Well, Michael, I'd first say, as you know, our position is longstanding, and we don't recognize the legitimacy of settlements. There's no doubt that the large number of settlement announcements made during the course of negotiations caused serious problems for the negotiations. And obviously, since we don't recognize them and we know where the Palestinians stand, if those were to cease, certainly that would be a good step. But I'm not going to overstate the benefit of the delay of a meeting. Go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead, Michael.
I had nothing. I was listening.
Okay, go
Well,
ahead. Okay. Sorry.
you said that despite the fact that you haven't gotten to your goal, they made progress on all the issues, but you won't tell us what progress that was, because that would be unhelpful for whenever, if ever, the peace talks resume again. I don't understand how you can even make that claim, frankly, with a straight face, because I think that it's possible. It is the situation on both sides is demonstrably worse today than it was back last July when this process began. The Palestinians have gone to the UN seeking membership or seeking to join all these conventions. They've invited Hamas to join a unity government, which you and the Israelis think a bad idea. On the Israeli side,
That's not our position.
Oh,
but go ahead.
You think what's not your position?
Well, they can pursue a reconciliation process if they
right,
if the government abides by certain principles.
Right, but because they have invited Hamas to join them, and because there is this reconciliation government, the Israelis suspended what was left of the peace talks. And as you just pointed out, during the course of these 9 months of negotiations, there were a large number of settlements built. So, how can you point to any progress having been made when the situation is now? There are more settlements now, or more announced, or more plans for more settlements. The Palestinians have gone to the UN, which is precisely what they said they wouldn't do, and what the Israelis didn't want them to do, and you didn't want them to do. They've invited Hamas into the government, and now, and the peace talks are no more.
Well, Matt, what I'm referring to is obviously the reason we've supported the peace process, and the Secretary has worked so hard on it from the beginning, is because agreement on the core issues would hopefully prevent things like settlements in areas that are occupied and all of these events that have been so troubling for decades.
Right,
so,
but none of that has happened, and there are actually there's more bad stuff now than there was before the whole peace process began.
They have not reached a final status agreement.
Well,
what I'm referring to is
understand
progress in talks about the core issues.
But what good is this alleged progress in talks if 9 months later the situation by every single quantifiable count is worse than than when it began 9 months ago?
Well, I don't think we've made any secret of our belief that both sides have taken unhelpful steps, Matt. We've stated that very frequently. At the same time, during private negotiations, they've dug into and made progress on the core issues where there needs to be agreement on in order for the two sides to be living side by side.
What does it say about the good faith of the parties? You continually say, and the secretary says, they've told me that they want to move forward, that they want a peace deal, that they believe in peace, when their actions belie that, what does it say about the good faith of the parties to actually reach an agreement? And are they just wasting his time if their actions on the ground completely indicate otherwise?
Says that there are decades of history on these issues, and we never expected that this would be a smooth road. And that's, the secretary has not a moment of regret about every ounce of time he spent on this effort.
I'm sorry. I mean, that's like a really good slogan. Like, we knew that this was going to be hard, but the secretary is going there, spending a considerable amount of time, political will, energy. That yes, he's working on other foreign policy issues, but clearly has made this a priority. So it's taking time away from things he could be doing other things with. And he's giving this his all, where the parties themselves are taking actions that are completely jeopardizing the actual progress that he's trying to make in the room. So, I mean, he's got to be really wary about diving back into a process in which the parties are actually working against him.
Again, Elise, the way he feels is obviously we're at a point where we need a pause. Parties have taken unhelpful steps. They need to determine whether there's a path forward. But because this has been such an intractable issue, and because it's an issue where the benefits of peace would be so great, that's why he has been so invested in it. It hasn't taken away. At the same time, he's worked on Syria, he's worked on Iran, he's worked on Ukraine, he's worked on
I'm not
South
saying
Sudan,
that he's not working on other things.
China,
I'm saying
North
that
Korea.
he's spent a lot of time and energy on this particular issue with very little return on his
Ask people in
investment.
the region what the benefits of the process would be. He didn't come into it with some sure bet that we would resolve things in the exact set out timeline.
You've in recent times, after the kind of breakdown or collapse, at least temporarily, of a peace process, you've seen a lot of violence in the region. You saw the Intifada after Camp David. Are you concerned that there could be renewal of violence on the ground as a result of the collapse of the talks?
Obviously, we watch things very closely, but that's not something I'm making a
Sorry,
prediction
Jen, you
of.
just said that the Secretary doesn't regret a moment. He has not a moment of regret about every ounce of effort.
Yeah.
That's how he generally feels.
Yes.
No regrets about what has happened over the last 9 months.
No regrets about the time he spent investing in this process. He still continues to believe.
And can I just wind you back to, sorry, Matt, you corrected Matt just now and said that it's not your position that there shouldn't be Palestinian reconciliation.
Correct.
That is actually different from what you said from the podium last week.
No, it's not.
when you
I stated last
You said it was
week.
a hypothetical because Hamas hasn't
I
yet.
stated last week that our position is if a unity government accepts certain principles, then it hasn't been our position to oppose that. No, I stated that last week.
But in Lebanon, there are members of Hezbollah that don't explicitly endorse everything that the unity government embraces, yet you take for the word of the Prime Minister, whether it's Prime Minister Signora, whether it's Prime Minister Makati. Over the years, you have looked to the Prime Minister and the policies he sets as indicative of the policies of the government. So why is there a double standard with the Palestinians?
Every country is different, and our policies are different as
But
it relates to different
I don't think
organizations.
it's any
as
different.
You know.
I think Hezbollah is equally as committed to the destruction of Israel that Hamas is. And why is what the Lebanese prime minister is able to get his government to make a policy different than what Abbas? Do you have less confidence in Prime Minister Abbas to
I'm
run
not
his
stating
government?
that. I'm not going to peel back the curtain any further.
So,
Go ahead.
sorry, just to follow on the reconciliation efforts. The reason I asked is because there was a report in Haaretz today that Phil Gordon from the White House was briefing some Jewish leaders on Friday, and he said that reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas, it isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, is that generally your position, the White House's position, or the administration's
It's long
position?
been our position that if they abide by these principles, but remember, they've tried this many times. They haven't indicated a desire to abide by the principles, Hamas that is. President Abbas has consistently had the position and stated it publicly.
Well, the State Department is well aware of the charter of Hamas. If Hamas recognizes Israel, it's no longer Hamas. Do you have any indication whatsoever that they are any closer to that, given Zahar made statements just about an hour ago saying that Hamas had no intention of doing
I
so?
think I just stated they haven't shown an indication,
Okay.
but our principles have been the same about what a unity government would need to abide by.
And Netanyahu was saying over the weekend that if somehow a unity government were to form with all of the cabinet members recognizing the three principles and respecting the three principles, and Hamas is in some sort of back room working with the government, he would not work with that government, he would not negotiate with that government. What's your position on that sort of dynamic?
They're going to make the choices they make.
Okay.
Obviously,
But
the
will you
timing of this
recognize-
last week
Okay.
was one of the issues that we pointed to, and we'll look and see what the formation of the government actually entails.
Yeah, and outside of the progress that you say they've made in the closed-door talks, can you point to one tangible, on-the-ground benefit that has resulted from the last 9 months of negotiation?
Well, Matt, I think obviously having both sides talk about these tough issues and be at the table together and address core issues that need to be reconciled in order to have two parties living side by side, we do see as a benefit.
Well,
I'm not going to lay out what happened behind closed doors, as you know, but again, that's where the progress was made.
But if I'm an Israeli or I'm a Palestinian, and today I look at my situation as it exists on the ground, what would you tell me is the benefit to having to these last 9 months of negotiations?
I would tell you that the benefit is talking about what the end game would be for a peace process where two parties are living side by side in
Yeah,
peace and
but-
security.
the talks are over.
Building measures over the last kind of 9 months that were supposed to create a climate for better peace. And I mean,
There were steps that the parties did take throughout the process,
So
whether
there
it was releasing prisoners or
Okay.
not going to
So
UN.
that's the-
Obviously, those things.
Right. They well, some of them happened. So the benefit to the Palestinians is that they got some of their prisoners released. Not all of them. But is that
One
am I-
of
that
the
is
I
one of them?
still
what's Israel's benefit?
one of the Matt, but but again,
Okay, well, there's something
the
you could
Israeli and
point
the
to.
Palestinian people believe there should be a two-state solution.
Right, but
Whether
that-
the leaders can get to that point is a separate question.
Right, but when I ask the question, can you show us tell us one benefit, point to one tangible benefit? I mean, that's one that you could there are now Palestinian prisoners who had been in jail who are back with their families, right?
I think there's a
Is that a
larger
benefit?
goal and
Right.
larger benefit.
So,
That's
in the
what
la-
the point
now-
I was making.
More broadly, has the Secretary spoken to anyone in Israel or among the Palestinian leadership in the last, I don't know, since Friday since this infamous Trilateral Commission meeting? Has he spoken to anyone either about the end of the peace process or about the apartheid comments?
He has not in the last couple of days, but remember our negotiating team and our ambassador and consul general have been in very close touch with both parties.
Do you know if your ambassador and the consul general have been in touch with their counterparts in Israel and the PA about the apartheid comments?
They're in touch on a daily basis about a range of things, so yes,
you
that's
think-
certainly.
Okay,
They've been in touch.
then the last thing, and it has to do with the comment, but that's it for me on
Okay.
this whole subject, and that is, are you surprised at all that this uproar doesn't seem to have caught on in Israel itself, with the exception, unless it's changed in the last several hours, with the exception of one cabinet minister? And what do you think, if you're not surprised, what do you think it says that this uproar happened, this furor happened here in Washington rather than in the country that is actually directly impacted by this?
Well, I think it's not a surprise because there are a range of leaders from both a range of political backgrounds who have made similar comments to what the secretary made. So
In Israel.
So not a surprise there. It's something that has been reported and heard frequently. In terms of why it happened here, I think, again, this speaks to the fact the secretary has been in Washington for more than 30 years. He's familiar with the games that are played in Washington and attempts by some to distort his record and his words. And that's why he wanted to speak for himself.
And can I just ask, does he have planned to change his view of attending and or speaking at allegedly off-the-record events because of what happened here?
He does not. He thinks there's valuable discussions that can happen, and there were a range of leaders there who he had a great conversation with.
Can I change the subject?
Just one.
Do we do okay? One more, and then we'll go to Ulysses. Go ahead, Michael.
Does the Secretary have any fear that the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement, the movement to delegitimize Israel, will gain steam after the failure of the peace talks? And I will just add that the BDS movement is a big fan of the word apartheid in the context of
You know his view and what an opponent he's been, and he will continue to make that view clear. One on the peace process? Go ahead.
So on a similar line as what Matt was asking before, I mean, it seems like the reaction, which you've talked about at length, has been just very, very, very shrill. And so, I mean, is it of concern to you that this, when this kind of thing happens, and I mean, Senator Cruz was not the only one calling for Secretary Kerry to resign, so is it worrisome that this represents a narrow scope of public discourse on this issue, and when officials can't speak with candor without risking becoming a political punching bag, does that endanger the prospects of having open discussions and having sort of forging a quicker path to a peace deal?
Well, we certainly hope not. And obviously, when you have someone like Secretary Kerry, who has a record of more than 30 years standing by Israel, walking the walk, not just talking the talk, and anyone who knows him would never question his commitment to that. It is concerning when people do take comments out of context or take comments as meaning something they don't.
But just to kind of wrap Matt's point and this gentleman's point, and then that's it for me.
Okay.
We should change
Go
the
ahead.
subject. But if it's only in Washington, and it's these political kind of partisan, and he's been in Washington 13 years, 30 years, and he knows how the game is played, and it's really not causing a fervor in Washington, why did he, in Israel, why did he feel the need to kind of put out a statement to mollify his critics in Washington?
Because he's not going to let people speak for him and what his views
Who cares what they say, though? I mean, if the Israelis aren't upset about it, and he feels that they know what he's talking about, and it's not really causing that much of a consternation there, why is he letting his critics in Washington kind of make a big issue out of
Because
it?
he and we are not going to let anyone from any political party distort his viewpoint and his record. And that's why we put out the
You
statement.
said no one who knows him would say this, but are you saying that Barbara Boxer does not know John Kerry?
Well, I think, obviously, I think his record speaks for itself. And
Mitch McConnell doesn't know people that he served for more than a decade with in the Senate. Not Senator Cruz, of course, who was not there, but Senator Boxer, Senator McConnell. They don't know the secretary?
well, clearly, I think his record and his
You're
work has speak for itself.
Right,
Matt.
well,
And
right. But
anyone
you're
who-
saying that anybody who knows him could not make this, would be willfully misrepresenting his comments if they said that he was saying something that was outrageous and unfair and ridiculous, correct?
anyone should know.
All right.
Anyone who knows him should know his record and what he represents.
Okay, so
Can I-
Senator Boxer then
I'm not going to
is-
speak to individuals who have put
Can I
comments
change the
up.
subject?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so this is on Russia and the sanctions.
Sure.
Have you seen the comments by Russian Deputy Prime Minister Rogozin saying, after analyzing the sanctions against our space station, I suggest to the U.S. to bring their astronauts to the International Space Station using a trampoline.
I'm
Because
sorry I missed that comment.
Basically, he's telling you that, because that Russia has been, transporting NASA scientists to the International Space Station because of cuts to the NASA program. Now he's saying that, basically you're going to need a trampoline to get your scientists there because these sanctions against our space industry are going to affect you.
I'm not sure that that's an accurate portrayal of the impacts on the programs. I'm happy to look into that, Elise. But clearly...
But clearly there is a lot of U.S.-Russia cooperation on the International Space Station, and they are helping you get your scientists there. So do you really expect that they're going to continue to help you on that now that you've sanctioned
Let
their
me
industry?
look into the specific details about the space program.
Basically, they're taking you to
as
take a
entertaining
flying
as
leap.
that comment is, that was made. Go ahead, Samir.
No, wait,
On Ukraine?
Well, on Ukraine
Or Russia?
sanctions.
Okay.
I'm wondering what your reaction is to the European sanctions that were, announced yesterday, but the actual names of the people involved who were revealed this morning. Whether you think that they go far enough, whether you have any concern that they don't match your sanctions, the U.S. sanctions, seem to target more of Putin's inner circle. These sanctions seem to apply to kind of local officials in Crimea, et cetera. Is that a problem?
No, and I would also note that in addition to targeted sanctions by our G7 partners and the EU, of course, Canada and Japan also announced their own sanctions today.
But they're in the G7.
Okay, fair enough. But I overlisted. I double listed, I should say. I would just say that we've been in close touch with the European Union. We knew who they would be designating. Our goal here and our effort was focused on complementary steps. You know why we took the steps we did yesterday, but we never expected them to be exact or exactly overlapping.
Right.
And it's more about not only sending a message, but taking a broad range of targeted steps to have an impact.
Okay, but you don't have any concern that they're not complementary enough?
No, we don't. We think they are absolutely complementary to the steps we took. Go ahead.
A couple of quick questions
Okay.
On Ukraine. Yesterday there was some kind of suggestion that there might be a Russian troop withdrawal going on around the border with Ukraine. NATO's come out today and said they don't see any sign of this. I just wondered whether you, from your sources, were able to tell one way or the other.
We have, of course, saw the comments, and we've seen many Russian claims over the course of time about military movements in recent months that were not true. We await actual evidence of significant Russian troop movements away from the Ukrainian border, which we have not seen.
Okay, and I just had another short one as well. There seems to have been a statement released by the U.S. Embassy in Kiev today, referring to the abduction of the OSCE inspectors, in which they talk about this being inhuman behaviour, but this is terrorism, pure and simple. Terrorism, as we all know, is quite a loaded term. Did they really mean to say that abducting OSCE inspectors is terrorism?
I think what they were referring to is the actions taken, the tactics. So obviously the actions of some of these pro-Russian groups are reprehensible. They are some of these are tactics used by terrorist organizations around the world, the taking of hostages, attacking peaceful demonstrators, using IEDs against security patrols, the abuse and murder of those who disagree with them. These are the same tactics we're seeing.
It's just the problem with that is that obviously Moscow used the same phrase to refer to the Ukrainian demonstrators who were
peaceful demonstrators.
Well, obviously their contention was that they weren't peaceful and they were terrorists. So I just wonder if we're getting into a situation where both sides are saying this is terrorism. And it's very easy to bandy around the term terrorism, but as we know, as I said before, it's very loaded.
There's certainly a difference, though, factually, between peaceful demonstrators and those who are woefully targeting, taking hostage, abusing, and murdering those who disagree with them.
But the Ukrainian government has said that it was engaged in, quote, anti-terror operations. So I'm just wondering, and given the sense that these tactics are becoming more like an insurgency, if as Joe said, that term is morphing into, is suggesting that this is morphing into more of an insurgency type situation.
I think, look, the facts of what is happening on the ground and the steps that the separatists are taking are, as I said, comparable to steps taken by terrorist organizations. That's
and when the
point
Ukrainian government says that it's taking anti-terror operations, are they going after terrorists or they're going after people that are engaged in these tactics?
They're going after people who engage in these tactics. But again, I'd refer you to the Ukrainians for why they use certain terms.
You have never disagreed with the use of CT operations. I mean, Secretary Kerry used it this afternoon at the Atlantic Council, but you have for weeks now, haven't you, not disputed the notion that the label...
I'm not intending to dispute it
No,
today.
I understand that. So, but this isn't anything new, is it?
No.
All right, okay. So, related to this, though, one of your colleagues, Rick Stengel, today published this piece on Dipnote about propaganda in Russia today. In light of that, I'm wondering what you think of this legislation that's going to be introduced tomorrow, apparently, by Chairman Royce and others, that would require the Voice of America, the BBG, to basically repeat U.S. government, report U.S. government positions as news. Or maybe I misunderstood. That's the way it was presented to me. That was the way. That was what it is. I mean, is that? I mean,
I'm not familiar with the legislation. I'm happy to look
Okay.
into it on the specifics of it. Obviously, the reason why Undersecretary Stengel put out the note that you're referring to is because we received a letter. We're responding to the letter. I think there is one important note on this front to note in terms of the difference. Obviously, we defend the right of RT to broadcast. They come to this briefing on a frequent basis. We certainly embrace their ability to report. We're not seeing the same, obviously, as it relates to events happening in Moscow, including the abrupt ending of Voice of America's ability to broadcast to Russia.
right. I'm not.
I know. I just wanted to use the
I'm
opportunity
not
to
taking
make that
issue
point.
or doing anything with Mr. Stengel's or Undersecretary Stengel's blog post. I just want to know that about if you could look into what the administration position is on this law, this legislation that apparently is going to be introduced.
I'm happy to look into it.
Can I go back to the peace process for a minute?
Sure.
Not the apartheid comment, but given now that the deadline has passed, is it your understanding that the assurances that President Abbas gave the Secretary about not going to the UN are kind of not valid anymore? Meaning, would you be surprised to see him go in the coming weeks to the UN, or do you anticipate, or has he been given any assurances that during this pause he will continue to honor that pledge?
Well, we are continuing to encourage both sides not to take escalatory steps or take steps that would be unproductive to the process. I can't speak to any assurances. Obviously, that original commitment was through the 9-month period. Go ahead.
New topic.
Sure.
Just one more on Ukraine.
Uh-huh.
If you could just refer to these other off-the-record comments of Mr. Kerry's about the
Sure.
pro-Russian forces having been recorded receiving direction from Moscow. I mean, can you tell us anything on the record? Have you confirmed this? Is this?
Sure. Well, first, let me make clear that during the Secretary's Ukraine speech on Thursday at the State Department, he attributed the same information to the Ukrainians. The statements are virtually identical in terms of content. He said, quote, "On Thursday night, on the record from the briefing room, our intelligence community tells me that Russia's intelligence and military intelligence services and special operators are playing an active role in destabilizing eastern Ukraine with personnel, weapons, money, operational planning, and coordination. The Ukrainians have intercepted and publicized command and control conversations from known Russian agents with their separatist clients in Ukraine." So despite the breathless headline, he was referring, as he did in public comments the night before, to information the Ukrainians have gathered themselves.
Oh, so when he says intel has reported, he was not talking about U.S. intel.
He's
He was
talking
talking about
about
Ukrainian
Ukrainian
intel.
That he
Because-
referred to the night before.
Okay, because the implication was that American intel was the one that recorded this conversation, and that raised the questions why this group of the Trilateral Commission is able to hear sensitive, classified information about U.S. intelligence that the American people are not entitled
He was
to.
not referring to a U.S. process. He was referring to the same point he made the night before. Go ahead.
So you would say that report then is incorrect, or it missed the point?
It is a mischaracterization of what he was stating and didn't include the comments he had made 12 hours before or 16 hours before. Go ahead.
Secretary Kerry will be traveling to Africa. He'll be stopping in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. When he's in Kinshasa, will he be talking at all about the rebel group M23? Right now, the Congolese are currently in the process of granting amnesty to some of their former members in Uganda. So my question is, does the State Department support the Congolese government in granting amnesty to what some people would consider former war criminals? And would they support granting amnesty to all of the members, because that's in the conversations right now?
Well, the disarmament of M23 is certainly going to be a part of the conversation he has when he's in Kinshasa later this week or early next week, I should say. He did an entire interview yesterday with Voice of America that I would point you to, where he spoke about this issue, but certainly talking about it and talking about the path forward will be a part of what he discusses while
Does
he's
the
there.
State Department support the Congolese government in granting amnesty towards some of these members?
I would have to check with our team on all of the specifics.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Can you give us a readout about the Secretary's meeting with the Egyptian Foreign Minister
Sure.
Fahmy?
Sure. Well, as you all know, Secretary Kerry met this morning with Foreign Minister Fahmy. During that meeting, he expressed strong support for Egypt's success in our strategic relationship and reiterated our continued commitment to working together to counter terrorism, weapons proliferation, and to maintain and to efforts to maintain regional stability and including peace with Israel. But he also made clear that while our work with Egypt is vital to our national security interests, the United States is deeply disturbed by the announcements about arrests, sentencing, and also about the crackdown on the April 6th group. He made clear that those steps are inconsistent with Egypt's pursuit of a lasting democracy. These actions represent a setback and make it more challenging to move forward. More needs to be done by the government on human rights, political inclusion, and economic reform, and in order to further release of holds on military equipment depends on greater progress. He also talked about the Al Jazeera journalists pressed for their release who have been detained, as well as a range of individuals who have been detained. And he made clear that they must change the course on human rights. More needs to be done on reform efforts.
So this is what the Secretary told him. What came out from the meeting? I mean, did they agree on certain issues or any future path
Well, as you know,
forward?
rarely in an hour are you able to agree to significant issues. But he made very clear what our concerns are, that we still continue to support, we will support our strategic relationship with Egypt, but these recent announcements and events are of great concern.
Do you have any comment about Senator Leahy's remarks on the floor today that he will not allow even the initial stuff that was certified to move ahead?
Well, as you know, we're in the congressional notification process phase, and over the coming days, we'll be continuing briefings with a range of senators, including, of course, Senator Leahy.
So he hasn't been notified. He has not been briefed on this yet?
Well,
because
he's
it sounds
certainly-
as though he was notified and said no.
No, I
to
did not mean
notification.
to imply that. What I mean is, this is the phase we're in. As you know, the reason we were able to grant these certifications is because it was allowed for in the appropriations bill. But Congress certainly has a powerful role to play in determining whether this funding moves forward.
I know, okay, but you don't have any specific, I mean, he says that it's not, that he's not gonna allow it, and until they make some progress on the democracy front, even though this is not the stuff coming from the democracy certification. So you don't think that that's a misplaced concern, or?
All I will convey here is that we will be briefing members of Congress, we'll be in close consultation, we'll be hearing their concerns.
Okay.
Obviously, we've expressed our own.
The administration's position then is that you still want to go ahead with this, it's not the right word, but first tranche of certified aid.
Can you say, could you flesh out a little bit more what he raised about the case of the Al Jazeera journalist when he was speaking to them about the minister? What did he, when he raised the case, what were his?
He raised the fact that they've been detained, that we believe in freedom of speech and the ability of the media to do their jobs, that they should be released.
I assume that already they raised the issue of the Egyptian court mass decision to mass trial of the people, and or the secretary or the foreign minister Fahmy explained something. It was satisfying, his explanation, because yesterday he was saying about that it's a court decision, the independence of the court, and other factors. It seems that it's not a matter of the attitude, it's more than explanation. I mean, do you have anything to say about that?
Well, the government is maybe operating with an independent judiciary, but the notion that their hands are tied, in our view, is not credible, it's not satisfactory, and it doesn't justify the steps that have been taken. And all of these factors are taken into account as we look forward.
The other issue was raised yesterday when the foreign minister is talking, and probably it was raised because there are some concerns here about what the foreign minister is calling this, like to diversify the relation with others, which means including, of course, Western Europeans and Russia in particular, which is like somehow annoying some people here. Are you concerned about Egypt's relation with Russia regarding political or military cooperation or other things?
We're not.
Okay. The third question, I think there is another one related to. Tonight you are going to, the secretary is heading to Africa and Ethiopia in particular. And in the recent weeks and months, there is a big issue of the Nile water issue between Egypt and Ethiopia. Are you asked or are you ready or be prepared to play a role in, narrowing the gap of differences between Ethiopia and Egypt, or what is your attitude towards?
Let me talk to our team. We'll obviously be doing a briefing for the press traveling on the trip on a range of issues, and we'll see if that's one of the topics discussed.
Just to clarify what you're saying about the taped calls, are you saying that American intelligence does not have recordings, their own recordings?
I'm not going to speak to our intel gathering processes or anything about that. What I'm referring to is what the secretary was talking about in his comments.
He was referring to Ukrainian recordings.
It's the point he made the same point he made the night before.
So he made it again on Friday.
Correct.
I'm just seeing this story for the first time. So this headline, Kerry, U.S. taped Moscow's calls to its Ukraine spies, is incorrect, at least in terms of what he said at this thing
Correct.
On Friday. It is not necessarily incorrect, though. The United States has proof that the Russian government in Moscow is running a network of spies inside eastern Ukraine because the U.S. government has recordings of their conversations. That is not necessarily incorrect because you might have recordings from the Ukrainians.
Well, he referred in the night before to steps the Ukrainians have taken. I'm not going to get into other levels of detail about what we do or don't have, but that was what he was referring to.
Okay, well, it says, the story also says that if U.S. intelligence agencies have intercepted proof of Russia's destabilization operations, as Kerry claims, did the Secretary claim that U.S. intelligence agencies have intercepted
He did not. As he stated the night before, the Ukrainians have intercepted and publicized command and control conversations. On Ukraine, or you can go to a different topic. Go ahead. Turkey, sure.
I had a couple of questions on Turkey. The first one is that Prime Minister Erdogan today said that he's going to ask the US to extradite Fethullah Gulen, who's the head of a large network. He currently lives in Pennsylvania and has done for a couple of decades. Are you aware of this request? Has it been formally made?
I've seen the report. I can't speak as a matter of policy to any pending or potential extradition requests, so unfortunately there's very little I can say here.
Is that because of privacy concerns, or...?
It's long-standing policy.
And are you able to sort of say whether what status Mr. Gulen is living under in the United States?
I'm not. I don't believe we can speak to that for privacy purposes. More in Turkey? Go ahead. Turkey?
The same issue. Is there a official request made by Ankara regarding this, or you cannot even talk about that?
I can't speak on pending or potential extradition requests.
He is not an American citizen.
I can't speak to that either, but
why not?
I don't believe, or maybe I don't believe he is, Matt.
He's not he is not an American citizen, and yet he is covered. But forget about visas. He is covered. So even though he's not an American citizen, just because he's in the U.S., he gets private.
It's our long-standing policy.
Well, wait.
What
To treat people who are in the
To
United
not
States
speak to-
as citizens.
No, to not speak to potential or pending extradition requests.
Can you
Go
tell
ahead.
us if he had any meetings with any American official? This guy, this gentleman, Gulen.
I don't have any further update.
But can you check for us?
I'm not going to have any update. Go ahead.
I have one more on Turkey, actually. So, Michael, yeah. I just wondered if you'd also see in the statement from Prime Minister Erdogan that he thinks that he's prepared to normalise ties with Israel within the next few days after Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu apologised for the raid in 2010. Is that your understanding of the situation?
I don't have any independent confirmation of it. I'd certainly refer you to the Turkish and Israeli officials on that front. We certainly attach great importance to the restoration of positive relations between them. You are all familiar with the role the President and the Secretary played in this effort just over a year ago. We believe we continue engaging with both countries, and we believe reconciliation would advance regional peace and security between
But you
them.
don't actually know if it's going to happen.
I don't have any further confirmation of it. Go ahead.
So this morning, North Korea conducted some live fire exercises. Has the State Department been in contact with South Korea, and how much of a concern is this to the State Department? With escalating tensions in the region, the President just getting back from the region, and looking forward to potential nuclear tests, which is a huge concern.
Well, we are, of course, closely monitoring the situation on the Korean Peninsula. We continue to urge North Korea to exercise restraint and refrain from actions that raise tensions. We remain steadfast in our commitment to the defense of our allies, including South Korea. We coordinate closely with South Korea, but I don't have any particular update on our contacts with them this morning.
Additionally, how important is that communication with Japan and South Korea during this time of tension?
As you've heard the Secretary say in the past, given the challenging issues they both face, including the threats from North Korea, it's important for them to have a dialogue and a relationship between the countries. Okay? Well, can we finish this and then we'll go to Iran? Go ahead.
Okay. North Korea, do you have anything about Matthew Todd Miller, please?
I don't have any new update to share. Go ahead.
Russia and Iran are negotiating an $8 to $10 billion energy deal. First of all, do you have anything to say about the deal? And then second, do you maintain that the United States sanctioning of Russia is not at all affecting negotiations with the P5+1?
We do maintain the second. As you know, the technical talks are continuing between all of the relevant countries. We've seen those reports. We don't have any confirmation of that deal actually being in place. If it were true, it would be of concern, but we don't have confirmation of that.
Thank you.
One more? Okay, go ahead.
I have a question on FIROM, former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. They had elections last Sunday for presidential and parliamentary. OSCE has said that the elections were orderly, but warned that they had failed to meet some important OSCE commitments, including ensuring a level playing field and accuracy of voter lists. And the main opposition party has said that they will not recognize the results. So I'm wondering if you have any reaction regarding the electoral process or the results themselves.
Well, we congratulate the people of Macedonia for exercising their right to vote in this week's presidential and parliamentary elections. We echo the OSCE's initial assessment that the elections were conducted in a smooth and professional manner with some technical irregularities. We continue to monitor the remaining stages of the election process, including the handling of possible post-election day complaints and appeals. And certainly we urge those who will form a government following elections to commit themselves to addressing any deficiencies or inequities in the broader electoral process as outlined by the OSCE. Thanks, everyone. Oh, okay, go ahead.
I don't know what else is going to be anyway,
Okay.
but Der Spiegel is reporting today again that there's a deal with Germany to accept an inmate or detainee in Guantanamo from Morocco. Are you able to talk to that?
I don't have any updates on that. I'm happy to talk to our team who does that and see where we are in any process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.